Hello, and welcome to class. My name is Rebecca Trueman, and I'm going to be your professor for this course. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background about who I am and to tell you a little bit about my worldview. In general, I believe in inspiring change through effective education. And in some cases, that's environmental education or sustainability education, or in others, it's business education. So I hope that you guys have a great class with me, and I'm here for any questions that you have at any time, so don't hesitate to ask. When we start to think about the sustainability program, really we need to think about the fact that humanity is in the midst of a largely unrecognized global emergency, one that puts the persistence of civilization seriously in doubt, and there is no agreement on the burning question, what can we do about it? That's actually a quote from Paul and Ann Ehrlich, who've been talking for years about the population challenges we're going to face in the future, but also about how global change is affecting business and how we really need to act and do something before it ends up being too late. When you think about me, there's really 4 E's that sort of capture who I am. I'm an experimentalist, an educator, I'm pretty entertaining at times, and I'm an environmentalist. I've also started a lot of different businesses, and I've always worked both in Canada, the USA, and in Europe at making sure that we advance the sustainability of our mission. My actual core research has focused on a little bit of the Anthropocene folks with anthropology, geology, diet analysis, and global change. I've had the opportunity to work in some very cool places like Biosphere 2 and Oak Ridge National Lab. And at those places, I did a lot with ecosystem carbon and nitrogen cycling, looking at what happens under future conditions and how will forests respond. I've also done a fair amount of work with endocrine disrupting chemicals, so EDCs, and pharmaceutical and personal care products in aquatic environments, and looking at how some pollution points from upstream transfer downstream and the health effects that those can have on not just people, but fish and other wildlife populations as well. I've also done a lot of work with sequestering carbon dioxide in fairly stable pools, and to do so we've actually seen great success when we have carbon stored in soil carbonate. The challenge is just how to get it that way. So we've used plant intermediary processes, whereas there are some experiments happening even on the West Coast right now that's using different types of chemical processes to create carbonate. So to give you an idea, some of the geology-related projects, I once spent some time in the Caribbean looking at an ancient Mayan site called Caracol, and through stable isotopic analysis of soils, we were able to plot where they were growing different species, primarily corn, around the major centers or the major ruins. I also did work in the desert in California. It was the Sky Oak site where we were doing elevated CO2 experiments with desert shrubs. From an anthropology perspective, I've looked at Egyptian pot residues to identify what the food was in the pots. I've also been involved in the Isla Sacra graveyard, and so there were ancient bones that we were looking at. And interestingly enough, we were examining how the population, which lived on the coast, didn't eat fish for hundreds of years, and why that was. Turns out, related to red tide, and red tide events are something that we're seeing more and more with climate change, and that are starting to affect human populations now, just as they did back thousands of years ago. And I've also worked using stable isotopes again to identify human remains, and so I've been on a few forensic cases with regards to that. I've also done diet analysis, looking at contamination, as I mentioned, of endocrine disrupting chemicals, pharmaceutical and personal care products, also BPA from baby bottles and things like that, as well as doing dog food analysis and analyzing foraging preferences of deer as they look at different things that may give them different nutrients. But for many a year, I spent some time at Concordia University, Chicago, which was a small liberal arts college in the Chicago area. And there I worked with a really diverse population, and we worked on some really amazing environmental problems. I like to get these students involved in real-world problem solving, and so I took a lot of these students with me on numerous different research trips, and they learned a lot in a real-world situation. I also spent some time at Biosphere 2 in Arizona, as I mentioned before, where we really got to live there and use the mesocosms as a research site for ourselves. Well, during our time in Arizona, we also did a fair amount of work in the Sonoran Desert. We went up through Sedona as well, completing transects to look at fire and environmental change in the area. Again, mentioning the endocrine disrupting chemicals and pharmaceutical and personal care products that we saw in the Chicago River. One of the reasons we were analyzing this is because the Chicago River, which used to flow towards Lake Michigan, the flow had been reversed. So all of the water in the Chicago River flows downstream to the St. Louis area. And they were seeing some high levels of potentially endocrine disrupting chemicals in their drinking water. And so we were trying to figure out exactly what the point sources were and how much was coming from Chicago and what we could do to limit those point sources. But no matter what I did and no matter what I've done, I'm always pounding back the message, we need to be environmentally responsible. What can we do to ensure environmental responsibility? There's a lot of things that have changed in a very short period of time in the world, and it's our responsibility to make sure that in our personal lives and in business, we're doing what's right for the planet, we're creating sustainable types of technologies, we're living more sustainably, and we're doing our best to reduce our impact on the environment through things like global change. When we really think about that sustainability stool that you're going to hear a lot about throughout this program, we've got these C principles, social, environmental, and economic principles. And if any one of those doesn't work, your three-legged stool doesn't work, right? So I want you guys to be system thinkers as we go throughout this program. I want you to be thinking about sustainable development, and I want you to always consider these three different components, the social, environmental, and economic components to everything we discuss. And I'm a big believer that we can solve problems. I love the quote from Einstein, the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we used when we created them. And to me, this is where students come in. This is where the young generation of new thought, new ideas is critical to making sure we create and come up with technologies that can advance sustainability and can support overall growth, not just in Canada, but globally, that is sustainable. Anyways, I hope that you guys are happy to see a little bit of introduction about me. Can't wait to learn more about you and your introduction this week. And feel free to reach out by email or through the learning management system anytime. Thanks so much.